Well, hello friends. Beautiful day here in Texas. It's been raining, but the sun came out today. And I imagine we're going to have some more rain. Sounds like a big whopper of a storm is hitting, Tallahassee area or something in there. Well, I did 3 videos in a series, as you know. I think they're pretty good videos. If you haven't watched them, you should watch those videos. I had said I might do a 4th video, and I decided I'm going to go ahead and do that. And the gist of this video is going to be, alright, we've gotten down some facts. We've covered some of the history, some of the mythologies, we've looked at the symbols, we've interpreted that pretty well. But something that sort of stands out, I think, to probably all of you, and this is why it's kind of a little tricky. What stands out when you finally pull the mask off the old Lone Ranger, pull the curtain back and you look at Oz behind the curtain and you say, oh man, this little guy, he's a fraud. He's just a fraud. And that's almost the way it feels. It's like once you find out, imagine you're a Christian. Let's say you're a normal Christian, Baptist, Lutheran, or something. Especially a Jehovah's Witness or an Adventist, and you say, this God, Jehovah, Yahweh, or if you're a Jew. Wow, can you imagine if you found out that your God was not God? But it gets worse. It might even be better if your God was not such a great God, but at least he was a God, right? But what are we really saying? He's not anything? You've heard people say that, well, there is no devil, right? There's no devil. It's just, the little thing we always say, you got the devil on, little demon on one shoulder and an angel on the other shoulder, and they're whispering in your ear. We always knew that was just a parable. We didn't believe that there were little angels. But then at the same time, our schizophrenic mind has gotten us to believe in all these beings as though they were real. We thought, well, now wait a minute. Those people up there in Europe, they were crazy, right? The Druids. They thought that there were fairies and nymphs and elves and salamanders or whatever. Oh, wait a minute. The elemental spirits are actually mentioned in the book of Colossians. Some of the modern translations is translating that correctly, but so Jesus was just casting out, he wasn't casting out actual beings, he was just casting out fears. Well, go back to the early classical Greek, you'll find out that daemons were things like phobies. Well, we all know that a phobia is a fear. Well, fears can't be people. They can't be beings. It's something inside you. And you need to let go of your fear in everything. The boogeymans and the monsters. Oh, maybe that's why some of these things, like in the book of Revelation, look like monsters. Is there really a monster after us? No. Not really. But you might as well say there is, because he's, whether he's real or not, he's debilitating. He's making you frightened. When you were a little child and you thought that, maybe there was a boogeyman or something under your bed. There wasn't really a boogeyman. You probably knew that. You were still afraid of the boogeyman. I remember when I was about, I think it was about 9 years old, and I remember I had to go. We lived in this big kind of a Victorian house out in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming. And there was lots of rooms on the bottom floor, and everybody had bedrooms on the bottom floor and stuff. And every night they'd send me up the stairs alone. There's a big banister, right? Looked like the Munster's house, right? And the stairs would creak, and like creak, and I'd be, I didn't want my mom and dad to not be proud of me. So I tried not to complain, And I didn't say, Mom, I'm scared, because, it's just, they were so proud of me, and I was the big man, and I was able to go and have my own bedroom upstairs. But deep inside, I was scared out of my mind. And every night I'd have to, creak up these little stairs and look in the door and make sure there wasn't anything in there, and crawl up on this old iron bed. It's one of these creaky beds with the big iron springs or whatever they made them out of. And you'd get on it, was like creaky, 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 creaky. And so I'd be laying there, and I remember a few times my arm would sort of fall off the bed and hang on the side, and then I wait a minute, I'd have to pull my arm back up because I was scared maybe somebody'd grab my arm from under the bed or something, I mean, I was scared until finally I'd fall asleep in the darkness. How crazy, how silly, So you've heard the illustration that Satan is darkness. I mean, that's the symbol that he has, He may be a monster, a dragon, or some other thing. But he's got this 2 horns and a pitchfork and everything. All right. But you've also heard this thing where, okay, God is light and Satan is darkness. Well, the illustration is that darkness isn't anything real. Because if it were real, when you walk into your house and you see all this darkness and you can't see, across the room, you're stumbling over the chair and stuff, and then you find the light switch and you flip it on. And with one click, now everything is light. Well, where did the darkness go? It never really existed. It's just a lack of light. In other words, it's a void. It's a nothing. It's an empty. You fill up the room with light, now you've got something. And now you can see things. Oh, there's the chair. It's a thing. And there's the wall. And there's the door. And there's my guitar. And there's my television. There's my desk. Okay, there are things in the room. And there's reality. But it didn't manifest until you turned the light on. So, your mind has got to be able to know and see. And then you say, oh, there's reality. You shut off the dark, you shut off the light, and now where did reality go? Well, it's not there anymore. No, it's there. It's just that you don't know it. You're not aware of the chair. This can cause problems. It can cause chaos and problems. So, some have said then that darkness is just a void. It's just a nothing. You can think of it this way. Let's say there's numbers from 1 to 10. 10 is everything. Well, 1 is just one thing. What is 0? It's nothing. We have a symbol to represent nothing. You can't, you take 0 and you add 0, what do you get? Still nothing. If you would times 0 by 0, what do you get? Nothing. If you were to divide 0 by any number, what do you get? Nothing. Because, you see, it's nothing. However, as a concept, it's something. Because you can conceive of the idea of nothing, or else we wouldn't have a symbol of it. But the point is that even though it's a symbol of something that we don't want, because nobody wants nothing. What do you want for your birthday? Nothing. Okay, we don't want that. How many years do you want to live? 0. Nobody wants that. So, you might say then that the devil is a symbol of something nobody wants. It's the symbol of darkness. Now, nobody wants darkness. I know a lot of people today have made Satan into some kind of hero. I mean, modern times, people are so tired of all the drip propaganda and religious, persuasions and stuff. And some people I think they're just pretending that, maybe they're just protesting against everything that people have tried to shove down their throat. And so I think there's a few people romanticizing the idea of the devil, right? He's got these horns, and, they make him all red with a pitchfork, and maybe they make a big tattoo on their arm. Well, it's not that, they're idolizing Satan. They're not really. They're just idolizing some version of a being that suits them. Because I don't think anybody, if they knew what Satan really is, would idolize him. He's nothing. Evil is what? Destruction. Destruction is the taking of something and making it nothing again. Like you have your wallet and then you lose your wallet. Nobody wants that. Well, the word to lose, that's the Greek word to perish or to lose, or sometimes they translate it destruction. In other words, it's gone. So, the God of nothing, or Abaddon, or Apollyon, just means to lose it or to perish, you see. And our Father in heaven, in the Bible, it says He doesn't want any to perish, but for all to attain into salvation. So nobody really idolizes nothing. And so I think some of the symbols have gotten lost, and because we've forgotten some of the meanings in the symbols. So the ultimate thing then would be reality, would be life, would be love, would be the number 10 all the way to the top. We want it all. So if we understand then that a lot of these ancient symbols are really just symbols of life and concepts and who we are, then we have to ask ourselves, all right, so is what you're saying then, Dave, is not only have we been duped about everything, but not only is there not a devil, and we don't have to worry, we're not going to go to hell, there's no hell, and we're not going to get punished, and nobody hates us, and God's not writing down all of our sins. But not only that, but are you saying that there's no God? Because maybe God's just a symbol. Right? If Ea Enki or Poseidon or Hades or these gods are not real, if there is no hell, then how do we know there's any Anu? How do we know that there is any Theos? I mean, why is it that the New Testament is so dogmatic about Theos and his being so important? All right. Well, let's discuss this, because in a sense, that's true. That's true. In a sense. Because the symbols of the Old Testament and the New Testament that symbolize this original God is metaphorical. And if you're saying then that even God, or the God of light there, is metaphorical, then you're going to have to admit that the Michelin tire man's not God. Doesn't matter how many thunderbolts Zeus has, he's not really even there. He's just a metaphor. He's not real. Well, there you go then, Dave. There is no God. Why are we even worrying about it? There's no hell, you said, either, right? So probably no heaven. Well, no, there isn't any heaven, because you see, heaven is a metaphor. So there isn't any place where we're going to go and sit on clouds and play harps, and there's going to be rainbows and unicorns. You're right. That doesn't exist. And now you're getting closer to the truth, right? I mean, you got Christians like, oh, don't you ever say there's no God. You'll go to hell, and you'll get tortured by this God named Satan forever and ever and ever, because our God is love. But he's not going to save you. He's going to throw you into the hands of the devil, and he's going to torture you forever and ever. But our God is love. Well, all right. Because they don't understand the symbols and they don't know that it's metaphor, they're lost. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to understand this is a metaphor. But have we just proven then there is no God? There is no devil. There is no God. There's no heaven. There's no hell. And so what are we really talking about? Shouldn't we have just done a video about how stupid it all is, and there is no God, and we're all atheists, and and so if that were true, then what would we do with ourselves? Because we're here, and could we go to the next level then and say, okay, well, if there's no God, then there's no good, right? Nothing is good, and so therefore there is no bad. Now, I've been saying there's no bad. Really, there isn't. If you try to make a law that says this is bad, then you're trying to make people act a certain way. And you're trying to say, all right, there's some authority outside of yourself that says this is bad. Now, don't get that confused with that we have to come to our own knowledge of what is good and bad. From gnosis, not by some law. And the reason why is because the metaphors, the symbols, are not teaching us that there is a God outside of ourselves, whether it's good or bad. We don't have an angel sitting on our right shoulder and a devil sitting on our left shoulder. That's a metaphor. We have a conscience, and we have to make up our own mind. We have to follow the Holy Spirit. So maybe what we're saying then is that yes, there is a divine being, and he is you. You're the divine being, and inside of you is also the devil, or nothing to be afraid of. You're not going to get punished because you are one with the light that is within you, and the light will guide you, and you will know for yourself what is right and wrong, and you can trust yourself because all there is yourself, and the universe should be run by all there is. The supreme being should be the one who rules everything. And if that supreme being is you, your higher consciousness, and if we're all one, we all have the same desire to get along and love each other and have harmony, if that's the main flow of the universe that is within all of this, in all, through all, and above all, then we have just proven that there is a divine being. And that divine being is in you. Okay. Sounds good. Maybe we just cleared it up. Okay, but let's take this a little further because we've got to really understand this. This is really important. We just spent hours and hours and hours, and I've got hundreds of videos about this, and so it might be important. People find this very interesting. They want to know the real answer here. So, let's go over this again. Is there just absolutely no divine being? No, there is no divine being outside of yourself. Yes, this story about Yahweh is a parable. Yahweh doesn't exist outside of you. He is your carnal, egotistical self. So, as a metaphor, he's real. The symbol is about you. And so this other being, light, that has the answers, is something that is within you. And so what we're trying to do is come to understand ourselves. You're trying to look at these parables to understand the universe, to understand all of the forces that may be in the universe. And then finding out that the universe is us. The universe is a concept. If you'll go back and you look at these parables, you'll find that it starts off with, at some point anyway, very close to the very beginning of the story, it starts off as chaos and waters and void and darkness and so forth, and then they create more gods from a lot of death and killing and destruction, and these other gods come along and they get noisy and they try to kill their father and they try to kill them, and this gets worse and worse, and there's gods coming up, and finally you've got Marduk, and they say, oh, he's different. And as we've said in some of the videos, this Marduk had eyes all around, and he had this mystical voice. A lot like the scriptures, which says in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Theos, the light, the shining, Zeus. And Theos was the Word. And all things came into being by means of the Word, Logos. And the Word became flesh, and he resided among us. All right, so why is the Bible, our very Bible, if you don't believe what I've been saying and all this is metaphor, then why is our Bible using metaphor? Why is it saying that Jesus is just a word, or the Christ that's in you? It's just a word, or an expression from the Father, from Theos, which is translated the shining, or the light, or the day, the Deus. You see, the New Testament, if it was translated correctly, you'd probably get the point quicker, that it's a parable, and it's literally trying to tell you that the Son of the living light is your word and expression which is the perfect expression of the light. Remember now, you turn on the light, you can see everything. You can see reality. Reality's always existed. It didn't evolve. It didn't get created. That's a parable. The problem is that reality cannot understand itself. One being cannot look at itself. It's got to get outside of itself to see itself. So the universe then, we, the universe, us, ourselves, we shrink ourselves down into some part of the universe, one part of it, so that we can look at the rest of the universe. And that's why it says in the Bible that everything that happens to us, in the parable, there's this guy who's blind. That's us. We're blind. We're down here in the world, and we don't know what we are and who we are, and we're born blind. And the disciple says, why was the man born blind? Did he sin before he came into the world, or did his parents sin? And, is it original sin that was handed down from Adam, or what's the deal? And we're blind. We're being, are we being punished with this blindness and this lameness, this deafness? Jesus says, no, you're not being punished. You did this to yourself. You wanted to do that. You got outside of yourself and you turned your eyes off. Right? Why? So that the glory of the divine light could be revealed. See, that way, if you had your eyes all the time, you always knew everything and you knew everyone and you were everywhere, then that's all you'd ever be, is everywhere and everything. You'd be good all the time, but you wouldn't really appreciate what was good. But once you suffer a little bit, then you're like really appreciate being good. But you can't really suffer if you're always just good. So you got to go down here and turn your eyes off for a minute. Maybe be a tree. Feel like being a tree for a while. Just experience being just a tree. Wow, this is amazing. Every part of the universe is something amazing. But when you're everything all at once, you can't really feel what it's like to just be a tree. I mean, let me just be an eagle for a while. Just soar through the heavens. Wow. But you see, you can't really experience soaring through the heavens if you're a fish, right? Because you're not going to be soaring through the heavens if you're a fish. But if you're a fish, you can imagine what it's like to go down to the depths of the bottom of the ocean and, look at the coral and all this, beautiful ferns and algae, and you get to witness things that, it's just amazing, just being, just learning, just to be, just to go with the flow. And then you learn to be a bird, and you can just be just majestic and fly way up in there in the sky and see your prey down below. But then you grow out of that, and you finally say, I want to be something different, and you become a wolf. You're this amazing wolf. You can just jump from rock to rock and right over a big fallen log in the trail, and you can go right through the bushes. You can go anywhere, and you're fast, and you can take down a big deer, and you get to experience the conquering and the pack mentality. And that's not who you are, but you've got to know what that is, what that concept is. But you can't know what that concept is if you just God. So you see, the man was born blind. He was born as a wolf or an eagle or a fish, so that he could see the glory of the light in all of its aspects. And this is why we need time, because you can't see, if you don't have any time or space, then everything that exists in the universe exists in one little spot. Right? And it can't know itself or step out of itself and look at itself. It's just there. And that's almost like not being there. It's like everything's there but the light's off. Well, we want to turn the lights back on. We don't want to be blind anymore. So we want a light to come on. So we've got to be everything, because that's who we are. We're everything. Well, if we're everything, we've got to be able to not only be everything, we've got to be able to feel everything. One thing at a time. We've got to be able to do that. Come on, if you're the divine being, you can do anything you want. Maybe you just want to be a rock and lay there and rest for a while. Maybe you want to be a horse. You can just run through the fields. And maybe you want to just be an insignificant grain of sand. You just want to feel what it's like to be indistinguishable from anything else. Just part of the sands of the sea. Whatever it is that can be experienced because you are the divine being, you will experience because that is you and you have that choice. You can do anything you want. We talked about, can the divine being create a rock too big for himself to lift? Probably so. I know, sounds crazy. Impossible. Well, no, because Jesus said, with faith, all things are possible. If you believe, according to your faith, so it will be. If you want to be that, you will be that. If you want to be that then, or now, or tomorrow, it will be then, now, tomorrow. You are then just conceiving and dreaming and living. That's what life is. It's just imagining. And so this is what we do, is we imagine and we live. So we create the world and then we rest. And we become this and then we become that. And this is what the divine being is. He's one. He's one. All things are one. We are the body of Christ. And there are many members. But the head cannot say unto the toe, I have no need of thee. You're just a lowly toe. Well, okay. Cut that toe off and see how much balance you have. Right? See if you can run a marathon without half a foot. Okay? It may just be a lowly heel. Right? Nobody needs a heel, correct? You need everything on your body. Every hair of your head is numbered by the one, by the all, by the light. And he's got to be able to experience. And so this is what time and this is what space is. It's not necessary. See, it doesn't really exist. It's a concept. What really exists is you. So there really is no God. And really, I guess what you're saying too, Dave, is you don't really exist. And I don't really exist. And nothing really exists. And it's just all a bunch of horse shit. No, I wouldn't characterize it that way. I would say that what we're trying to do is understand ourselves. This is not baloney, as some of you might say. Oh, well, then it sounds like I don't have anything to believe in, and this is all a bunch of crap. Friends, look, we're not trying to blow a bunch of hot air up your, backside. This isn't just nothing. We're not, the greatest philosophers, Aristotle and Plato and Pythagoras and whatever, these guys were real people in history. They weren't idiots, and neither are you. But they were studying these parables. And they were poets and songwriters. My favorite singer is John Denver. And he sings about the Rocky Mountains. And he sings about the country roads. And he sings about sunshine on his shoulders. To me, that is the most beautiful poetic stuff that one could ever conceive. And I love the way he played the guitar. He was of my era. A lot of you younger people probably don't even know who John Denver is, but I loved him. And it saddened me when he perished in that plane crash. And it seems like all the good ones perish. And another one I enjoyed was Jim Croce and Glenn Campbell. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, time is flying. And these minds, these beautiful, amazing souls that helped us on the path and guided our minds and our thoughts and our hearts. And they stood up before the UN. John Denver stood before the UN and he said, we've got to come together. We've got to love each other. And he spoke so eloquently and he sung songs that made us cry and made us laugh. And yet today, many of the youth and people that are alive today, they don't even know who he is. They don't even know who he is. A lot of us are still saying, oh, wow, Martin Luther King was such an amazing man. Well, we don't know who he was. We don't even remember it. It's just that he's just a statue now. He's just another boulevard somewhere in our city. Washington, oh, he was a great, president. Well, we don't know who he is. But what we have is these parables, the story of our beginnings and who we are, where we're going. And somehow or another, we've become idolaters. Now we're worshiping Martin Luther King, you know. And I understand. I understand, you know, the tendency. Because sometimes I have to go back and listen to my John Denver. And I'll sit and cry. And remember the good old days. You know. Because sometimes it's okay to pretend. To imagine that, you know, you can just use physical audible words and cry out to some bearded man in the sky and he's going to come down and save you. Or maybe, you know, Mother Astarte is going to come down, or Isis, and save you, and this is what you believe. Oh, you wicked, that's a pagan god. No. It's all it's just concepts and thoughts, and everything's a concept. The only thing that's real is you. And the only thing that's important about you is that you're happy. And that everyone around, well, you can't be happy if you're hurting other people. They're all extensions of yourself. You're going through this world not to learn to be evil, because somehow there's an evil part of you that's trying to bust its way out, and we've got to all get punished forever and ever and ever, and all. This is not the meaning of the story. Oh, we've got to judge one another. No, we don't have to judge one another. Oh, well, there's a God and he's love, but he's going to kill us all. No, we're misunderstanding it. So, okay. So what we're saying is that there is a God. We'll call it God for the moment because we're in America and that's what people normally say. I don't like the word too much because it doesn't express the truth, because if we're going to get to the truth, we're going to get down to the bottom of it. What we're talking about is light. And if I say, well, the divine being is light, then it might help me to kind of keep on track here. In the parables, if you spoke Greek and you said Zeus, you'd probably know, oh, that means light. But now that we don't speak Greek, we're kind of confused. So, but then if I say light, oh, if light did this and light told us to do that, you know, you'd be like, what are you talking about? Light's talking to you? Are you crazy? So it doesn't mean, you can't win for losing, right? You try to tell people and teach people or express, you know, but the problem is this long 1,000 years of indoctrination, and now we've got some bearded guy in the sky, and, you know, it's like, we're all schizophrenic. So there's the big problem, is that we're dealing with all of this hodgepodge of ideas, and, you know, our government's chaos and our world's chaos and our television's trying to deceive us. And we're all kind of lost in this maze of ignorance. Well, that's what I want to do then. I want to go back and look at the original parables so we can understand our Bible, the Sumerian tablets, right, the Bhagavad Gita. I want to look at these books and say, what does it mean? Where are we going? What are we doing here? What's the truth? And ultimately, the truth is that there was a particular one of these deities that's in every one of the parables. And we've already said that in the Sumerian tablets, his name is Ningsita. And he was that spiritual voice that spoke to Eve and said, go ahead, you need knowledge. You've got to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You've got to know for yourself. Don't you worry. I'm going to get you there. I've got wings. I'm going to guide you to the tree of life as well. And you're going to live forever. Well, see, that voice is inside of you. Who was it? Ningsita. Well, Ningsita was Thoth to the Egyptians. Who's Thoth? Oh, is that where we get the word thoughts? Is that Jesus? Now, see, I was saying in the last video, I was saying Ningsita is Jesus. A lot of you don't believe me. Wait a minute. Who is Thoth? Thought. Isn't that the real deity? Isn't that the supreme deity? Not the chaos that, you know, we've all evolved out of. There's, like I said, everything's always existed. We're everything. Problem is that we got tired of just being everything. We want to be one thing and this thing and that thing. We want to know everything. We want to feel it all. So we decided, because we were bored, to go down into darkness and, you know, shut some of that knowledge out of ourselves so that we could learn. It was a choice. If we're the divine being, we can do whatever we want. So we wanted to understand everything. So we went on a journey. You know, have you ever done that as a child? You go out through the woods and you've got your little machete and you're hacking some bushes and you're making a trail and you're pretending you're cowboys and Indians or whatever. You're playing trucks and cars. You're pretending. You want to experience, you know, what it would be like you're talking to yourself and you're in a drama, you know, and you're battling and you dun 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 dun, you know, and you're wrestling with your brother and sister on the floor. And this is just what we do. Consciousness needs to express itself and pretend it's this and pretend it's that. But in this universe of all the different various things, who is God? Well, God is everything. God is one. We're all part of this oneness. And so, you got the original deities that are fighting and killing one another and the struggles. Well, you've got to know that to start with, right? You start to flip on the light. Maybe you got one of those lights that turn a little knob and it comes on real slow. And at first you can just turn it to the number 1 position. It's just kind of dim. You can start to vaguely make out the chair. But you're not sure what it is. It might be a monster. It's kind of dark still, but, you know. Then you can turn it up to 2 or 3 and it gets lighter and lighter. Well, that's the dawn. That's when the sun comes up on the horizon. And that's kind of where we're at right now in world history. We're beginning to make out some of the figures in the room and starting to understand reality. And we're starting to think, wow, maybe we're living in a hologram. And, you know, maybe the physical is not real. And maybe we're all that really is. Maybe our minds is all that really is. So we begin to experience the idea that some of the deities that come later are really, you know, the newer deities. They're really the ones that were from the beginning. Jesus said, I am from the beginning. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. What is he? I am the bright and the morning star. I am the one who stands at the door and I knock. And I'm trying to guide you back to your Father in heaven. And if you'll just open the door, I'll come in unto you and have supper with you. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the life. Who am I? That's what you have to figure out. Who am I? We're not trying to figure out who is God. We're trying to figure out who am I. Really. Because you and I are really just, you know, entangled in this great love story. You know, they get the male and the female. They fall in love and they get to become one. And they make children and they have a family. And it's all one. The universe is just trying to get along. Trust it. It'll be fine. It'll all be fine. Don't be afraid. There's no fear in love. You don't believe that Jesus and Thoth are the same person? Well, John 1:1, as we've already talked about, says this. In the beginning was the Logos. That's the word in Greek, the Logos. And the Logos was with Theos. And Theos was the Logos. And everything came into being through the Logos. What does the word Logos mean? Well, today we have the word logo, logic, right? Logistics. Well, it's the mind. It's the expression of the divine. See, the expression or the mind or the thought. Thoughts. Well, in Greek they called him Hermes. And you see, whether in any language, in all the languages, this particular God always ruled over one planet. And it was the planet that was closest to the sun. And today we call that Mercury. That's the Latin word. If you know anything about astrology, you'll know that Mercury is the mind. So the Greek was Hermes, and the Latin is Mercury. Now, what is Hermes? Remember the word Hermopolis? So Hermopolis is this ancient city in Egypt. Now remember, ancient Egypt had Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt. Upper Egypt is actually the southern part. So we'll just say the northern and the southern Egypt. So in the southern part of Egypt, the southern kingdom, right at the northern part of the southern kingdom, between the two kingdoms in the center, there was this great city of Hermopolis, ruled over by Hermes or Thoth. And it was considered a place of great learning. They had an academy in Hermopolis. And Cleopatra the Seventh went down there and was a great scholar, and she learned from this great academy. And it was said that they had this communication. There was a priesthood, see. That's what, in those days, the academies were priests that taught the great wisdom. And so there was another great library in Alexandria, which not far from there was the ancient Heliopolis, which is where they had all this knowledge and the great wisdom. Well, Thoth is the god of magic and wisdom and knowledge and communication. He's thought. And so you would think with two places in your body, in your heart has to communicate with your mind. And when you have that communication from heaven to earth, then you are aware. All of you becomes aware, and you have that Christ consciousness. So thought, then, is something that we should be doing with communication with the higher consciousness. And there was that ancient communication that the priesthood had. As we said, the cities in Egypt, and also in Babylon and Ur, in that area, and even here in America, they mapped out their cities and built them according to certain central energy points that is in the universe and in your body. And they would make the libraries and the hubbubs and all of this goings on as not just a nation, not just a political thing that has no meaning, but they patterned everything after the truth, after the essence of all that is. You know, maybe we need to go back to that. Well, a lot of what we do today is patterned after the ancient days, after the ancient kingdoms. This is something that most of us don't even realize. You know, the Hermopolis means the city. You see, it's a metropolis. We still use the word today. And we have the politics from the opolis and the policies. And so all of this is connected to the ancient design of an ancient wisdom. And this is the esoteric ancient truth that we need to understand, that's hidden in the symbols and carried on down through the ages in the Book of May, or the Book of Wisdom and Knowledge of Civilization, the instructions. But we're not understanding the instructions. They never were a blueprint for how we should judge one another. They're a blueprint of how we should receive communication from the higher consciousness. Well, as above, so below. Your body then has certain center points. And so basically they named the stars for places that are in your body. And they built the cities in a way in which would represent those stars and also places in your body. The place that is your mind, your thought process, your logos, is where you house all of the ancient knowledge and truth. That's where everything or reality comes from. So Hermopolis would be the center of it all. See, we were talking about Samaria before and Eridu and stuff. Now we're talking about Egypt and a different river, the Nile River. And that Nile River represents the river of life. And we've talked about that in many videos. But there's some other very important words that have come down to us from that word, Hermopolis. How about the word metropolis? See, the polis at the end is how we say a city. What is a city? Well, it's a place of commerce. Commerce. Ka together, merce. Merce is Mercury. In Greek, they called him Mercury. That is also the word that we have today that has come down to us as market. It's where we all go into the center and we pay for things we need. Well, they didn't have the same meaning. All the words didn't mean exactly the same things. They'd come down to us slightly different. And so today, that sounds like a strange thing, right? That the word market would have anything to do with this ancient city with all the books and all the, well, it's the place where it's like the hub, the metropolis, where everything connects, and it's where you go and get the stuff. In England, in London, they used to have a thing called the stock market. Well, today we have a stock market, but it's just an exchange of money. But originally the stock market was where they exchanged fish. They traded. And you would come and you would get a fish and you'd say, merci. Well, in French, you'd say, merci. Thank you. In our Bible, it is simply something that is free, right? It is the great mercy. And this is where we get the word mercy. And so in France, you say merci, you're saying thank you. Well, we say in English, mercy. All of these words go back to this word Mercury, or the god of the mind, where we receive everything for free. It's paid for. So a market is where you pay for things. Well, in our Bible, it means it's all paid for. It's the center. It's where it all comes from. It's the stock. It's the place. The center. The metropolis. And so the opolis is where we get the word police. It's where we get the word politics. Because, you see, today we've certainly come a long ways from the original meanings of these words. We're supposed to have a government that's come up out of chaos, and it's trying to make form and order out of chaos, and we need a place to go and receive the things that we need freely. We shouldn't have to pay a bunch of money. It should be free trade. It should be just go and get what you need. I've got an extra fish. Do you make shoes? I wouldn't mind having those shoes. I will give you all this fish that will feed your family. Well, you trade. It's commerce. And so it has nothing to do with coins and money and, paying some kind of price in the sense that we think of it. Although to pay a price has come from that word. Because once it's paid, then it's yours. It's free. You can have it. So the price was paid. It's mercy. Remember, in the holiest of the holies, there was this seat, this place that was called the mercy seat. Because that is the place that we've got to appease. Because we've got to all get in there so that we can make the trade, so that we can have the sufficiency, so that we can go in and come out freely. And we can trade and have our commerce and have our mercy. And say, mercy, thank you. Our politics have taken a very bad turn for the worse. Politics should be a place where individuals can go to the place of commerce where they can trade freely all of their wares, and this then is the mind that houses and stores all of the great wisdom. Because all you really need is a free exchange of ideas. Isn't that true? You don't really need anything else because everything else is free. So mercy, Mercury, comes from Hermes, and these are the same basic words, just from Greek to Latin. And it really goes back to this place in the mind, or love, or grace, or freedom, or the Egyptian Thoth. So there are different places in your body that represent different things, different gods. There's one God that rules over the mind. There's a God that rules over the heart. Different places. Saturn is the 7th planet. It is down at the base of your spine. It is the bottomless pit, so to speak. It is that place where all the lust and the carnal desires exist. And it's not like we don't need those things. They're very important. Let's say that civilization sort of loses its equilibrium and we go back out into the wild. Well, you need certain instinctual things to survive. You're running along on a trail and a big tiger jumps out of the woods, and the adrenaline comes up from below, from beneath, from this inner being. The adrenaline tells you quickly what to do when you can't literally think about it with your own mind. If you had to stand there and think about what to do, you'd probably get eaten by the tiger. But you don't have time for that. So what you do is you listen to your instincts and you run. And the adrenaline gives you the strength to get out of there. So it's not like we don't need the lower parts and instincts of our flesh. The problem is that we don't want to be hindered by fear. We want to overcome fear with the truth and the light. So there are 7 planets and there are the 7 subtle bodies. These are the minerals or the magnetism or the material world. And so they represent various subtle bodies. You have the etheric body, the emotional body, the mental body, the astral body, the etheric body, and the celestial body, and the casual body. You have all of these various places where you actually do your thinking, or where you are conscious. You see, it's not who you really are, but that's where you're conscious at the moment. Sometimes we're just thinking emotionally. Sometimes we're thinking instinctually. Well, we need that. Like I said, when you're in the woods and a tiger's after you, you need that. Sometimes we need to think from our heart. Sometimes we need to think logically from the mind. And sometimes we don't need to think at all. Right? We don't even need to think, because the superconscious mind of the light within us knows what to do, and we don't even need to think about it. So that's what Jesus was trying to say. He says, don't let these subtle bodies, this dragon, don't let it overwhelm you. Say, get thee behind me. Remember the story in the Old Testament where Joshua took the 5 kings and he crucified them on 5 crosses so that he could win the battle and go into the promised land? Well, the only way you're going to win the battle and get into the promised land is you're going to have to take the 5 senses and shut them off. Sometimes you need the 5 senses. There's nothing wrong with the body. There's nothing wrong with any of this. Sometimes you need those things, and we enjoy those things. But if those things have taken you over and it's become a prison, and you have got no control over your own body, then that's when you've got to say no, and you have to have the control. So you need to crucify the flesh and become alive in the Spirit. And that means the awakening of the Christ. Christ is that logos, that center mercy seat in the most holy, deep within you. Because you see, the minute you're conscious of something, then you are that. See, you are conscious physically now. Therefore, you're not even conscious of your super divine self. The light within you has got it all taken care of. You need faith. You need to just relax and rely upon His mercy. Because the messenger of the Father, which is light, that has come to us, the messenger of the gods is Mercury, is Ningsita. He came to tell Eve, don't worry about it. We got this. That is the light that is in you, that is the messenger of the light that is in the universe. It is the Ningsita, the Thoth, the Mercury, the Hermes. It is there. It is the bright morning star that guides us into eternal life. So in a way, you could say that you're everything. You are Ea Enki and Enlil. And you are also Ningsita and Dumuzi. You are Inanna. You are Osiris and Isis. You are Horus and you are Inanna. Namu and Ninki, Ninhertsag. You are the Absu. You are the Tiamat. You are the equilibrium. You are the whole. And when you find yourself alone or afraid or full of fear, all you have to remember is, you know something? I'm only the fear so long as I want to be. As soon as the game is no longer fun, I don't need to be this anymore because I am also the light. Nothing controls you. You control everything. So remember, the little demon on your shoulder, he's probably lying to you. Okay, that's fine. Just as long as you know it's just a big lie. And sometimes we can get caught up in these lies and believe all of these things. And we start thinking, well, I'm no good and I'm not worthy. And you know what? I don't have anything. I don't have a home and I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have a car. Guess what? That's just a little game that you're playing. Now let's try another game. Let's try this. Listen to the little angel on your right shoulder, because he's whispering in your ear too, but you haven't been listening to him. He's another voice inside you that says, you are anything you want to be. I love you. And you can do anything you want. And whatever you ask, you will receive. Go ahead and ask anything. Whatever you ask, I will give it to you. You can ask the Father yourself. He loves you. And whatever you ask, you shall receive, that the Father might be glorified in the Son. And that my joy might be in you, and that my joy might be full. You know the way, Thomas. You know the way. Peter said to the Lord, you don't have to go into Jerusalem and wake up and be the Christ. You need to stay as this physical human person in this physical world and battle the monster and stay here in this crazy, crazy situation. Jesus looked at Peter and he says, Satan, get thee behind me, because for this hour have I come. And Jesus went and he said, Father, thy will be done and not my own. Jesus understood that the physical flesh was not everything. He wanted to teach us that we didn't have to worry. We're still going to be us. We're everything. We are immortal. You don't have to listen to the devil. You can tell him to get behind you. Take a hike. You just don't have to listen to him. Jesus didn't go to die. Remember that. He went to live. Because when Jesus overcame everything, even the fear of death. Even the fear of death. He had no fear. And he overcame hell. Why? To show us that we don't have to be afraid. We are the king. We are the ruler. We're the one in charge. He came riding into Jerusalem on a donkey. He had control. He put a bit in that beast's mouth and he rode that beast into town. He had mastery. And so he rode into town and he crucified the flesh and he transformed his body into an immortal one. Because he chose to. Because he wanted to live forever. And so he was raised up into immortality. Just as you can. Anything you want, you can have. Now the story that Jesus was crucified doesn't mean, don't take it wrong. It doesn't mean we all got to die and we can't have anything we want and the Father's will is that we must die. That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about not being afraid of death, not being afraid of pain or anything that can happen. And remembering that you are the resurrected Lord, the Christ. When your eyes become open, you will recognize him. And that little boat that you're in, you know, it's tossed and turned and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm so scared. Maybe I could lose my boat. I could drown. Peter was walking on the water and he looked away from Christ and he started to drown. And Jesus reached out his hand and said, don't be afraid, have faith. Jesus was in the boat all along. And when the disciples recognized him and they woke him up in the boat, the Christ took charge and he calmed the winds and he calmed the sea. The little boat came to rest and there was peace. That's what we want. We want victory. Victory over what? Over this deal we're making to get this new house? Or over the whiskey that we're drinking over every night? Sure. Yeah, you need to control that. But you also need to control, and the most important thing you need to control is your fear. Your fear of life itself. Don't be afraid. The greatest mastery that you'll ever attain unto is not sitting in a corner going, oh, look at me. I can fast for 40 days. Oh, look, I can do gymnastics. I can breathe good, right? I have some kind of special breathing, and I've mastered this diet. Ah, that's great. But have you mastered the fear of humiliation? Have you ever noticed a little puppy? Little bitty puppy comes into the room. Even dogs as they get older. They're so full of themselves. If you try to talk to one of the other dogs, then they're looking at you and they're jealous. Everything's about them. Everything's about them. They have no clue that when you're saying, hey, how you doing, that you might be talking to a different dog or someone else. They can't understand that everything's not about them. And see, that's how our physical self is. It seems like everything's about our physical self, and if we're not getting enough attention, then we're not happy. But we've got to learn to overcome that. That is the greatest thing that we need to learn. As soon as we give, we'll receive. Whenever we can lay down our life in love, we will gain our life. I'm not saying that we need to go out and shoot ourselves in the head. That's not what I'm saying. It's not about the physical world. It's about the control of the lust of the flesh. The dark anarchy and the chaos of the netherworld, we've got to overcome it, and we've got to listen to the messenger of the gods who came to the world to tell us the revelation of light. The light that is you. You've got to wake up. And that's what the meaning of all of these parables are. So then, this book, this Bhagavad Gita, this Epic of Gilgamesh, the Atrahasis, the New Testament, the Torah, does it tell the truth? Well, yes, it does. Is the very words of that book your life? No. You see, as soon as we start thinking that we're going to get saved by a book, then we're not going to get saved at all. In fact, we're delusional. And that's exactly what the Apostle Paul was saying. The letter of the law brings death. You know, we don't worship a book. The Bible is just a tool. It's a poem. It's just a song. You know, I listen to John Denver, and to this day, sometimes I start crying because it just speaks to me. And it teaches me about who I am. But, you know, the important thing is that I am. And you are. And what are we? We are anything we want to be. So the stories that we read, our literature, the writings are inspired of the light. They are not the light. They are only inspired of the light. And it was certain people who were inspired of the light, and they wrote it down. Well, here's the thing. Those were priests, prophets of ancient times. But now, the Apostle Paul said, you have boldness to enter into his throne. There used to be a temple, and the only way to get in there was a veil, and only the high priest could even get in there. And the Gentiles and the heathen and the lowly little peasants had to stay outside the city gate. It's not that way now. This is a parable. Remember the parable that Jesus gave about the rich man that died and went to hell? And he said, you know, go back and warn my family about this awful place down here. Go tell my brothers and my children so that they don't have to come here. And the angel said, you know, if they don't believe Moses, they're not going to believe me. They're not going to believe another prophet. See, you've got Moses, you've got Buddha, you've got Krishna, you got them all. And you didn't believe them, you didn't understand them, you couldn't comprehend it. You've got to get your own vision. Now, they can be helpful, you can meditate on their words, but the Holy Spirit is your only teacher, not the book. The book is only, the Holy Spirit shall guide you and teach you into all things. You need no man to teach you. The point is that light is something that you are. And the darkness is something that you are not. This is telling you that the universe is much better than you thought. It's not a bunch of bearded men fighting in the sky with swords and, you know, and shields and horses and, you know, that would be horrifying to think that the universe depends on some warring, you know, spirits. Well, they've been having this big war for centuries. Isn't it great to find out that that is a parable about something that's going on within you? And that we don't need to depend upon someone outside of ourselves, some bearded man, but that we can literally, through faith, reach the center where the innermost holy of holies is. And we can go on in there. And whatever we ask, we shall receive. When you pray, believing that you shall have it. This is good news. This is the gospel. And we need to make sure that everybody has it. Because if everybody learns this, the world is going to be great. Our marketplace is going to be changed. Our politics, our cities. And we're going to change the world of chaos into an order which is free. Right? Where we don't force it by law, but we rely upon the inner light within us, and we'll be saved. If we can just finally get people to understand the conclusion of the matter. That is what we've got to do. And it starts with us. Each and every one of us has got to understand this and try to, by example, display the love that this book talks about, and finally receive Christ. So I know, friends, I know that the ideas that I am explaining here in this video can be very, very frightening and very unsettling and maybe a little confusing. When a child, a baby, has a little pacifier, that little baby thinks that that pacifier is so important. If you try to take that pacifier from them, sometimes they'll cry and throw a tantrum or just feel like their whole world is just falling apart. If you take that little bottle from them and you start trying to feed them from a high chair and you give them more solid food, it's very difficult. It's a transition. Don't worry. Go slow. You don't have to do this in an instant. It doesn't happen overnight. You learn as you're able. There's no right or wrong way. The world is gradually growing and growing unto perfection. For some of us, we don't need a church. The problem is that if you find a church that is trying with all its heart to tell you that you're condemned unless you do this or that, or try to control you, it may actually be instigating things inside of you and teaching you bad habits. I think for most of us, it is time that we stop giving our money to churches and political parties, and we start remembering what our real government is all about, the Constitution. It's about they shall make no law respecting my freedom and my liberty. We need to start standing up for that Constitution. Our very right to be free and own land. And teach our children what we know in our heart. You know, somehow that's going out the window. We're losing sight of who we are all the time. And even though I think the world is gaining and growing little by little, remember, go back a couple of hundred years, we had slavery. Women were not even allowed to talk. They had to wear little bonnets and stuff. We're making progress. It's actually legal now to have herbs that grow in our garden, and we can use those herbs. We should be allowed to have anything we want in our bodies. Any kind of herb or anything like that. Maybe we shouldn't try to sell these things and make a profit off of them, but we should be allowed to have as much of these herbs that grow naturally in the wild as we want. I mean, cannabis grows on the ground. It's not something to be regulated by government. These are the kind of things we need to make progress on. And, you know, I don't know if many of you really realize this, but we're arguing about how many taxes we have to pay. And yet we don't realize that probably maybe 80% of our taxes is going to some sort of bureaucracy. And it's not helping us. Maybe we should completely get government out of all of that and put the roads and the schools and whatever else in the hands of the private corporations. Now, if you want to send your kid to school, you pay for it yourself. The government doesn't pay for it. Oh, well, then that means that everybody's not going to have education. No. It means that everybody will have absolute free access to everything. Everybody has free access to the land. Everybody can go to school if they want to, because they'll have their own land to grow their own things. They can trade and barter, and that's the kind of world we need, where it's real free trade. And the government doesn't control your education and turn it into propaganda and basically rob you in the process. Telling you, oh, we need billions of dollars for this. When they only need maybe, what, a couple of million. They don't need billions. Now they're taking and pocketing the rest of it. You say, oh, that can't be true, David. Well, have you ever thought about how much money they're making on Interstate 95 with all these toll bridges and all these toll roads? They're just robbing you right and left. They're making billions. There are literally millions of cars going up that Interstate 95 at any given hour. And every one of them are paying their money. And that money's going where? To build schools and roads? No. It's going into the hands of bureaucracy. You're not going to see it. The military, what is it, $1 trillion? How do you know where that money's going? Can you imagine if they were to show us the books and show us where all that money's going? Oh, well, it was $1 billion to make this plane. How much does it really cost to build that airplane? $1 million? And you're paying $1 billion? Who's that money going to? Who is it going to? Oh, I'll tell you. Little corporations called Lockheed Martin is one of them. Right? Down there in Silicon Valley, owned by the same people who just was given these satellites so they can completely enslave us and monitor us, that we ourselves paid with our own tax money. A fraudulent government. We're not free at all. And it's time that we wake up. And it's the same thing with religion. We don't need all of these rites and ceremonies and the and you may feel peace when you go to church and you like these rites and ceremonies. But you do it at your own risk. When you get on your knees and you literally, physically talk to a bearded man in the sky, you're doing it at your own risk. Because you're convincing your own mind that there's somehow a bearded man in the sky, that you can change his opinion about the situation and beg him, but actually you're not. You're really just going on and on about how unworthy you are and, begging him to be what he supposedly already is, love. You see, what's happening is counterproductive. You need to stop allowing your mind to be afraid and to be deceived. And you need to understand where our Father in heaven is, where the light is. It's inside you. Jesus came, the messenger of light, and he told you. He gave you the revelation. He said, now open your eyes. And he says, now you command the dead to rise. And Peter did it. He said, silver and gold have I none. But what I have authority. Get up, take up your cot and walk. And the man who was a paraplegic just got up and walked. Friends, that's what we need to do. We need to understand that Christ is in us. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go, friends. I hope this video really put it all together. This is probably going to be the end of this series. This is the 4th video. I'm going to go ahead and go. I'll see you guys tomorrow. You guys have a great day.